And I think we're live. Hi, John. Welcome to the webinar today. I'll do a quick intro and then I think we're all ready. So microphone's working, video's working. Yeah, I got you on mute. I got you off mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we got it. Perfect. Got it. So we're here today together with John Coleman, who will talk about the specifics of agile teams through the eyes of leadership. John's a longtime friend of ourselves, of Abby and myself, and of the company. And he's a well-known agile trainer and coach. John is also, moreover, a professional Kanban trainer, professional Scrum trainer, and a less friendly Scrum trainer as well. John, the floor is yours. We'll do, by the way, a quick Q&A. No, we don't do Q&A. We'll do questions during the session. So you can post your questions in the comment field of the live stream on LinkedIn. So I'll pick them up, and then when John has a little gap, I'll try to ask the questions for you to John. John, here you go.
Thank you so much, Bram. It's an honor to be here today, and thank you everyone for joining this talk online or watching the recording later on. The overall theme of the talk today is about executive agility. How do executives progress with implementing really authentic, sustainable organizational agility to achieve either their goal, or they might have some optimizing goal, or some people prefer to say maybe going in a direction of travel, going in a particular direction and trying to make progress. Some people say we need to evolve from where we are to figure out where we go next. But there will be some sense of direction for the organization. And often people use agility to help them to get in that direction. And my particular passion is in helping people to be authentic about how they actually do that. So the name of the talk is Hit Delete, and there's a reason for that. And the main reason is that really to improve organizational agility, we actually need to stop doing some things. A lot of people think we need to add lots of more things, and to an extent that's true. I don't really have recipes here, but there usually are signs that things that we need to remove. We can simplify things, we can make things better for our organization. And when I talk about authentic, sustainable organizational agility, there are lots of solutions out there for teams of teams, for product managers, for product leaders, for agility coaches and trainers, for scaling or descaling practitioners. And some people would say there's lots of content out there for leadership. And to an extent there is, but also there's kind of a lack of, well, where do we start? How do we progress here? How do we make progress? And that's what I hope to focus on today. It could be you as an executive, or you're dealing with an executive as a -1, or maybe you're some kind of professional or agility coach who is working with executives. So this talk is for both the executive and for people working with the executive. And a little bit of a health warning before we move on. There are some people out there who are quite frankly brilliant. They can go into an organization, they can do their thing, they're really talented, they do what they do, and good luck to them. I'm not one of those people. Usually there's a bit of a, don't want to say the word journey, but there's a few things I need to do before I can start making progress. And for me, getting credibility is one of the first things that I need to attain. Whatever about my track record in agility, outside software and in software, and in different industries and so on, often when you go into an organization or you go into a particular discipline, if you're not speaking in their language and their lingo, understanding the problems that are going on in that business domain, that technical domain, it can be difficult to get people to listen to what you're saying, because maybe they feel that you don't deserve to be listened to just yet. Some people struggle far less than that than I. I'm not one of those people. But there are some thought leaders that I want to acknowledge here who really were behind a lot of the thinking that I'm going to talk about today. There are some fabulous people who gave me inputs when I was working in this over the last 4 years. You can see lots of prominent names, some less well known names. And there's also people I haven't named here. There's some other wonderful leaders and coaches that I've worked with that for now shall remain nameless to preserve the innocent. So this isn't just me talking about my experience. This is really, I guess, synthesis of conversations, deep conversations about different bodies of knowledge. And often people would differ quite a lot in terms of what they mean by these things. And often their body of knowledge could even be in contradiction to other bodies of knowledge. So trying to make sense of what's going on and helping people, but really very eminent people that this is based on. In terms of an executive, what do I mean by an executive? I guess I mean a person or a group who is appointed and maybe given the responsibility to manage the affairs of the organization and has the authority to make decisions within specified boundaries. It might be a person who owns the strategy or sets the direction of travel, and it might be somebody who justifies investment. There could be different examples of that. For example, somebody operating at CXO level, someone reporting to a CEO or a chairwoman, could be a board member of a company more than 1,000 people, maybe a regional president or one of her reports for an overall 100,000 plus person organization, a board member of a Fortune 500 organization, and so on. You get the idea. It could be her one to ones, it could be her coach. So, this is what I'm aiming this talk at. These are the people that I'm suggesting could deal with this content. Before I go into the content, I want to talk about what I perceive to be the big lie in organizational agility. I love what Klaus Leopold says. He says that agility is not a team sport, it's a company sport, or maybe I would say an organizational sport. And I love what he says there because a lot of the time, senior leaders say we just need the teams to perform. But often the executives, the leaders who are saying that are the people who might need to help cultivate a better environment so the teams can make more progress. And I believe that the big lie is you're empowered. I am giving you power. It's almost like a command and control expression. I love delegation poker from Management 3.0. It's got a lovely little technique for each little decision. You can figure out how much delegation there really is from a leader, from a manager to people and teams. For example, what level of delegation applies if a team is using Scrum, what level of delegation applies for what work we decide to do in the next 24 hours in a daily Scrum. If you were to read the Scrum guide and if you look at the spectrum of delegation from Management 3.0, where 1, 2, 3 manager decides, 4 manager and team agrees, 5, 6, 7 team decides, from 1 to the manager telling to 7 full delegation without even having to tell the manager what they've decided. It's a lovely technique, a delegation poker, and I've had more than one occasion where a Scrum team worked with a senior leader, and when we asked, well, what level of delegation applies for the decisions that the Scrum team makes at its daily Scrum, a lot of people in the Scrum team saying maybe it's a 6 or a 7, saying they've got full delegation, or maybe they need to tell their manager. But maybe their manager thinks it's a 2. They think that they need to sell ideas to the team every day at their daily Scrum, which is not the way Scrum should work, of course. And what I love about delegation poker is making peace with where the manager leader is and what her perception is, and then asking what do we need to do so we can build more trust so the team can go to the next level of delegation, 3, for example, in this case, out of 7. Because for me, being empowered, it's not on or off. It's a lot of the time people are empowered until they're not empowered. And it's all very well to be empowered when the sun is shining and the traffic lights are green. But when things aren't going so well, how empowered is the team really? So that's my point. And so, really, what I want to talk about here today is deletion. And when I say hit delete, it can, some people might get the impression that I've got a recipe here. And I want to qualify what I mean by this because it's not really hitting delete. It's really, can we do less of this to the extent that it's rare? There might be reasons why some of the things that I'm suggesting we stop doing. In your context, for whatever reason, maybe you need to keep doing them. But if you're doing them all of the time, it can be an indication that maybe there's more work to be done in order to help teams, help the organization to achieve more agility. So when I say hit delete, so when I say stop, I really mean, can we do less of this? More stories like this, less stories like that, kind of a thing. So I came up with a kind of a spectrum of colors, and it's just purely coincidence that they tie in with other color codes out there. Nothing to do with spiral dynamics or any of that kind of stuff. It's pure coincidence that it's similar to another spectrum. And I'm using it because I think it helps us to kind of see levels of progress. Now, one thing I just want to say is this is not a linear approach. This is just a set of patterns that maybe you could observe, and if a lot of these patterns exist, it might mean that we're impeding the agility in the organization, which might be impeding your travel in that direction of travel. So some of the things that myself and others who I've mentioned earlier on this call have noticed. If you want if you want the organization to make progress, maybe you need to stop making demands, demanding that things get done by particular dates. I'm not saying never do this, remember, less stories like this. Maybe less stories like fixed price, fixed scope. One I discovered in the last 6 months, which I found really interesting, was delayed meeting minutes. And so this happens in some companies where the executive team agrees things in formal sessions. They agree them verbally, but then the meeting minutes are delayed, and delayed to an extent that people are massaging out what was agreed verbally. And so people are saying, well, actually, what was agreed is whatever comes out in the minutes. So they feel safe agreeing things, but actually, it's not agreed unless it's in the minutes, kind of thing. And that's something that I believe to be very toxic. It leads to lack of authenticity in terms of what we're doing. So it's less consistency between what we're saying in public and what actually is going to happen. These are things that I would like to see less of. Less of, this is another form of the same thing, I guess, unpicking decisions that have been made. It's right to uh, turn over decisions that are the wrong decisions. I'm not saying we should continue with execution bias going down a particular road where is the obviously the wrong road to everyone. It's self-evident to everyone around the table that we shouldn't continue doing this. But what I'm talking about here is where there's a pattern where almost every decision gets unpicked. As soon as we leave the metaphorical meeting room, people are already plotting and scheming to unpick those decisions. Another one would be lack of prioritization, and I would say sequencing. And some people say, well, they have actually prioritized, But if the amount of work prioritized, for example, for 2022 is more than the entire capacity that you have for 2021, you know how many things you did in 2021, you know, based on the throughput of the organization, how much stuff we can deliver. And of course, we do want to be focused on outcomes, but we have an idea of how much work we can start in a year and how much work we can finish in a year. And so when I see people already having the year full, and we know we're going to have lots more bright ideas during the year, when I see people saying they prioritize, but actually they haven't really prioritized within the throughput of the organization, I find that to be something that doesn't really help. Essentially, it's the equivalent of almost pushing work into the organization, more work than the organization is capable of delivering, all because maybe we haven't been willing to have the conversations with our minus ones about what we'll not do this year or what we'll not do this quarter. Also, what we need to see less of as well is the need for perfect information to make a decision. We need to do more research. We need to do this. We need to do that. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of experimentation. And I'm actually suggesting that people get started and they do experiments. I'm speaking from the Excel Arena today, where I'm working with 200 people designing experiments. And so we need to discover to deliver, but continuing to wait for more perfect information. We're trying to find the perfect information. Uh, other Our competitors are just going to leave us behind. They're just going to make decision with less perfect information, and they'll do some experiments and then make some progress. The killer one for me is, apart from prioritization, would be the complacency that I see often in relation to improvement and learning. And when people are looked seriously in the eye, do we say we've got a learning Friday or learning Tuesday morning or whatever it is, and then managers, leaders proceed to give people 60 hours of work to be done in 40 hours a week. And so it's just a kind of a cynical badge that maybe the HR folks can say to get the employer of the year, to say that we have these systems in place, but the reality is we're giving people too much work. So improvement and learning is not actually a priority for the organization. Now, you might be saying, so what to all of these? And so why is this important? Why are these so important? I hear executives saying, well, Rome wasn't built in a day, and that's true. And at the same time, you need to lay down some bricks, you need to make some progress. And I see people saying, well, I hear people saying we need to move inch by inch. And actually, when you look at the behavior, they're not even moving millimeter by millimeter. So it's really glacial progress in terms of change. And what I've seen for myself is a set of really capable, really enthusiastic, skeptical, but really willing to embrace a change of agility. And they give up. They start giving up because it doesn't matter what they try to do within their own team. They they see it that the whole system isn't improving. So what's the point? We need to wait until something else is fixed, kind of thing. And I find that sad when that happens. For me, I think it's okay for teams and for people on the ground to move at slower pace. I prefer to move at a faster pace personally in certain cases where there's lots of appetite, so we can make some real progress. But my feeling is that at executive level, we need to move a bit faster so that people don't start losing hope that this is really going to work. When people start losing hope, it's really we're, 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 we're much more likely to end up with what a lot of people call the agile industrial complex, where you could do that. Um, I just noticed a question in from, I think it's John, and it's the question is, if I could pick one deletion to focus on, what would it be? I would say the lack of prioritization, John. That would be the one for me. And lack of prioritization in terms of the quality of prioritization that really does try to match the throughput of the organization with the demand that's coming in and making space for what might already happen during the year. Because filling the year already in January when we have going to have lots more better ideas, hopefully during the year, leads to difficulty, I would say. So, where could you start with this? So, just to make this a little bit practical, in terms of delayed minutes, well, we could have immediate minutes. If the people at the climate conference can send out a communique immediately at the end of the conference with a press release and all that kind of, why can't we do that in our companies? Instead of maybe demanding that something happens by a particular date, can we use probabilistic forecasts? Now, I just want to put another health warning here as well, because probabilistic forecasts, the quality of those forecasts is going to be very much underpinned by um, how balanced the flow of the work is in your organization. If you have 50% more work coming in every month than goes out of your teams, you don't need to be a genius to figure out that the team is probably have too many plates spinning. Work is likely to take much longer. We call it cycle time or end-to-end cycle time or lead time. Different expressions for those. How long we take to do things gets longer, and if that happens for long enough, our throughput, the amount of items, the amount of projects, the amount of product deliveries that we get out the door ends up going down. But you can start somewhere, because one of the sentences that I learned from one of the members of the Agility Chefs community is, when you show a probabilistic forecast saying 85% chance will be done by this date, but I'll give you a better forecast next week, by just saying, but I'll give you a better forecast next week, is already saying that my current forecast is wrong. So you're already setting expectations that the forecast might be wrong. You could review flow analytics, even if you're not yet in outcome land where you're worried about changes in customer behavior. If you're still in an organization where people are very focused on finishing projects, you can at least review, well, how many projects are we finishing versus how many are we starting? That can be really enlightening when you start looking at those. And another idea I got from some of my colleagues and one of my clients is maybe try 9 minutes learning at 9 a.m. Maybe change our diaries so that we don't have meetings starting at 9 a.m. Maybe they start at 9:15 a.m. 9 minutes, watch a video, look at an article, do something. It's a tiny step in the right direction, but maybe something that we could try. So the next set of deletions that I look for are as follows. And one of the things that really bothers me is when I see the old guard, so to speak, getting promoted. The very people who I would not want getting promoted, um, I mean, in kind of a leadership context here. Um, some organizations, what they do, they when they're doing an agile change, they have a lot of tolerance for people and teams and individuals who aren't really up for the change, and because some people, they need to see more proof points that this is going to work in this organization, and some people just don't think it's the right thing, and maybe sacrifices can be made in certain cases where their skill level is so high that we can't afford to lose these people, and even though they're absolutely against the change, we can try to build scaffolding around them so that we can still make progress without imposing an agility on these people, because we want to invite people to agility, not impose it on them. But really good organizations with agility, what they do is they have zero tolerance for command and control behavior at executive and senior leadership level. And so when I see senior leaders getting promoted, particularly into teams that actually are demonstrating really good progress with their agility, it can have the effect of new leader, new broom, and can hit the reset button a little bit with the teams. And if they're already struggling with the previous deletions, where people are starting to wonder whether we should do this, and then they see somebody's promoted in on top of them who is so detailed in terms of what level, it's almost like an inquisition in terms of how much information we're being asked. Um, it's it's something that really bothers me. Inflicting help on people as well is something that bothers me. Tom Meller, I consider him as one of my mentors. And a few years ago, when I was with him in the United States in his car, he said to me, "John, don't ever give advice unless people ask for it." But he was giving me advice when he told me that. There was irony there, but there was humor there as well. And so recognizing that people need to be asking for help, they're much more likely to be listening if they're asking for that help. Passive risk management, where we put risks on a risk register and we assume that Vanessa is the owner of that particular one, Bram is the owner of that other risk, and Abby is the manager for the third risk, and they've got the mitigating actions that have been done by that particular date. With Agile, we try to be much more proactive, and the Scrum people and the Kanban people even would be trying to prioritize work that is risky as well, not just valuable. I would consider dealing with risk uh, as a really good way of actually delivering value. We might have failure demand, as John said, and says we might have done something wrong to the customer, or we might have some technical debt in our company if it's software, for example, or we might have other types of debt in our company in terms of organizational debt, systems, processes, and so on. So being very passive with risk management, that's something that bothers me. Leaders broadcasting rather than talking one-to-one with people, actually listening to people. To the extent that maybe there's even a blindness to what constraints there are in the organization. So what I look for, a lot of telltale sign for me of a leader that needs a little bit of work in terms of the basics would be when the executive feels that she can scale her way out of any problem, she can outsource her way out of any problem. We just add another supplier, it'll be fine. That will get you somewhere, I guess. Particularly if the suppliers are long-term suppliers, that might be okay if we're building up trust and it's like a big family kind of thing. Um, that can be problematic if we're very transactional with our suppliers. Um, I had one case where the work was being retendered every 9 months, so the knowledge was going out the door every few months, and was really quite damaging. Also, maybe a focus on star performers. The belief that I could see John Jorgensen is on the call here, and he would be a star performer, I believe, in the agile world. And if we have John on that team, everything would be great, and it would be great. But there's only one John, so um, and for me, the metaphor here would be what I observe, for example, in the Premier League in football in England, is that I'm not really sure Alex Ferguson would have done well right now because he was a believer in buying star players. And I think a lot of the managers who do well now in football and in sports in general are ones who try to build the team they have, and sometimes are brave enough to not actually get any new players at all, like Jurgen Klopp did a few years ago. One of the summers, he didn't get any significant new players, and he just tried to help his team to move on. And so the focus on team performance as opposed to individual performance, and of course getting rid of these delusions of predictability that we can deliver it'll all be done by the 9th of September, boss, and a lack of agility discipline. So dailies, for example, if you're doing Scrum, for example, and having dailies, if you're doing Kanban, updating your Kanban board, um, maybe reviewing your analytics if you're using Kanban, using your Lean UX canvas properly if you're using Lean UX. I'm going to come to some of the questions shortly. I just want to explain that why I think this is important. Uh, it's my hypothesis that unless these behaviors, if you like, are removed, it's kind of like one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas, and we're not really going anywhere fast. Um, and in terms of how you could maybe start working on that, maybe we could start recruiting or promoting with agility in mind. If agility is so important to us, making the behaviors that we expect from agile leaders important in terms of leaders that we promote in the organization. Instead of broadcasting, maybe listening, really listening. Instead of focusing on star performers and efficiency, it's more efficient if the experts start. If you get the experts to start everything, then we're going to be constrained by the experts because they've got limited capacity. So letting non-experts start the work and then letting those non-experts refer to the experts when they need help, which means that the experts are no more scalable. They can actually help more teams because people are starting and they're learning about that work. Maybe getting a bit more informed on complexity. In fact, when I talk to executives, the very first thing that I talk to apart from the why and what problems you're trying to solve and all that, but the very first piece of content that I usually talk to executives about is the Cynefin sense-making framework from Dave Snowden and Cognitive Edge. And so getting informed on complexity, realizing that sometimes experts disagree and they don't get right things the first time, and they might need a bit of fresh thinking. They might need to try things a few times. They might need even to run some experiments and so on. They might need to start somewhere and then just see what happens, and based on the evidence, maybe decide what to do next. And maybe also giving some clear guidance for non-teams, because what I see a lot is a pattern of people saying they're in a team. And there was one team, a so-called team that I came across 3 years ago, and I remember I was doing story mapping with them, and we kind of had a little rule that we wouldn't be on our phones, we wouldn't be, um, we'd be focused and all that kind of stuff. And I actually noticed that people were on Facebook, and I was saying I had to stop them a few times, and then I kind of lost my patience a bit, and I said, "Do you not care about each other's work?" And they said, "No, we don't." Now, my reaction wasn't the best. I said, "Come back when you're a team." That was because I had lots of other people that I could be helping in that organization. I probably could have helped them if they're interested in becoming a team, but they were really just kind of like a center of excellence or center of arrogance, I often call it, where they're basically serving other teams, and so actually their real collaboration energy was with the teams that they were serving, not their own so-called team. So some guidance on how those kind of teams would work, if you like. I can see a few comments coming in, so I'm not sure if I'm able to flash them up. So I'm going to talk to them. So I just see a comment here from Aram saying, "How do you get execs to notice and make deletions?" And well, first of all, what I do is, particularly with the very first set of deletions that I showed you, Aram, what I would do is I would show how much work is going out versus how much work is coming in, and I would try to make it more obvious that the prioritization that I'm being told is happening isn't effective because there's still more items on the list than our capability. So I usually start there. Um, a lot of the time, I am listening for words. Um, so the word efficient would usually be a trigger word for me, be a kind of a sense that people just want to squeeze more juice out of the teams. And I often wonder when people want efficiency, why are they using agile? I mean, don't get me wrong, agile and agility helps you to improve your efficiency. I love what Russell Ackoff used to say: the more right you do the wrong thing, the more wrong you become. And for me, and I wrote, I made an attempt at defining organizational agility. You'll find that blog post on scrum.org. What is organizational agility really? You'll also find it on Medium. And one of the first words that I have is effectiveness. Are we even doing the right thing? And actually, the second last word that I have is efficiency. So I listen to what words, what language has been used. Kind of gives me an indication in terms of the thinking, Aram. Let me know if I've answered that satisfactorily for you. Thank you, John. I agree. Tom is he's a really great agilist. I really admire his work and his posts. Um, Another question I see here is from Aram as well. Is how do you get execs to understand the idea of deletions? I think when I talk about it with individuals, I focus more on simplification. How can we make things more simple? And by showing that already, usually there's already more work coming in than is going out. So by showing that the organization is already maybe overburdened, overwhelmed with work, um, I can kind of articulate that adding more is not going to make things easier. That by if we can try to take things away and try to make things more simple, we might be able to make more progress. Sometimes people don't want to do that, and often I need to recognize quite early as well that there's a lack of willingness. Um, if I was to get to the punchline, really for me, an executive, I love what the large scale Scrum community does in this area, where they say managers are optional. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have them, they're very useful. And if you have them, they're often more effective than Scrum Masters at removing impediments. Some of these impediments might be at organizational level. For example, maybe maybe some of our teams are very well informed on flow and they understand the whole idea of stop starting and start finishing. Maybe they understand the idea of limiting the amount of work they do in a sprint if they're using Scrum. But maybe they're trying to make an impression because the system that they're operating within is based on how much of an impression they make, and the impression they make is often by, did they take another piece of work on for the team or for themselves as an individual. So often there are some organizational problems where even if people understand flow and they understand pull systems and all that kind of stuff, they're systematically motivated to outdo each other individually, which can erode team performance. So let me know, Aram, if I've handled that for you. There's a question here as well from Chandri, I can see. What techniques can you use when people don't realize that they need help? It depends, quite honestly. Um, I think the most important thing that you need when working with people is to have some credibility with them. Um, Even if you're saying all the right things from a theoretical point of view, do you have the credibility? Did you invest in learning about the business domain, the technical domain? Uh, did you learn how other functions in your organization speak, what lingo they use, um, in order to be able to communicate effectively? And that would be the baseline, I would say. After that, really, if people don't want help, there's really not much I can do. People, for me, it's my style. You can consider it a quality, you can consider it a flaw. I help people who want help. I'm not the kind of guy you want if you want people to be policed into doing something. And I think many of us here as well aren't like that. We like to help people when they want to be helped. So the most important thing is having effective conversations. You can use professional coaching skills and all that kind of stuff, but for me, whatever conversations you have, the context of the conversation, I think you need to permission to have that conversation. I only teach when I've got permission to teach. I coach when I got permission to coach. I only give advice when people ask me for advice. That requires me having a lot of patience. But sometimes I might need to make something really obvious so that people can see a problem. That's just shining a light on a problem. That can often help. But I also have to be watching out for whether people are ready to listen. Me saying something when people aren't ready to listen can be a waste of energy for everyone involved. So, timing, a sense of timing, is crucial as well, I would say. I see John has a comment here as well. Thank you, John. Wing walkers always propose a better alternative for what you want to delete. When walking the wing of an airplane, you never let go of the plane with one hand before you've got a firm grip on the plane. Yeah, it's very good advice, John. Um, if there's a vacuum, something always fills it. So, yeah, I think that's really good advice, and that's a good tip. Thank you for that suggestion. Erin came back saying, "Thanks, John. That made sense." And I see Cheatham here is here as well. I think I know Cheatham. I think I do. Any advice on those old guards in the organization? Any advice on the old guards? Well, it's kind of similar to what Chandri was asking a while ago. I mean, I've come across some members of the old guard quite recently that uh, people are saying to me, need to be influenced, and all I can do is make an offer um, to have a conversation. But often, I think what I found very useful over the years is if people won't listen to me, who do they listen to? And maybe can have conversations with those people and see if they can have some kind of an effect. Um, I I I do use another technique as well, but I don't. It doesn't always work. Um, According to one of the top 10 reads in the Harvard Business Review, one of the top 10 reads on people and change, 50% of executives are uncoachable. 50%. And I've come across a few that I don't know, are they uncoachable or not? Maybe I just wasn't the coach for them, but I got the impression that it was going to be difficult for me to make progress. And so I kind of got a little tip from Simon Sinek. You know the way Simon Sinek, the kind of famous thought leader, sometimes he has these videos on YouTube, and he's got someone interviewing him, but actually Simon is just talking to the person. It's almost like uh, a prop, really. The person's like a prop that Simon Sinek is talking to, and so I noticed that people like watching other people talking. And so sometimes I would get people to watch a video of other people talking about a subject, and they'd be convinced by that person, but they wouldn't be convinced by me just by watching the video, because maybe I'm not the right person to say it. So sometimes just recognizing that maybe you're not the right person or might not be the right time. Timing is everything, as someone told me years ago. So I'm going to go back to the content now. I'll keep an eye on the other comments. Thank you for those questions and comments. I really appreciate it. And John is absolutely right. When you say we're going to do less of something, what is it instead that we're suggesting that people do? So we've gone through the first two stages, if you like, and so now let's dream for a moment that we've actually managed to get rid of a lot of these things. It's actually still a very stressful situation because now we're neither here nor there. We're kind of in a halfway house, so to speak. And so we still have some problems. And one of the problems could be, you guys over there in that team, you need to be more efficient. I talked about this a little bit in the previous stage as well. A focus on short term suppliers, improving our capacity, this kind of belief that we can add more people, we can add more suppliers, and everything will be great. They don't see that actually maybe there's two or three people in an organization, maybe it's only one person that and that one person has limited capacity, and it doesn't matter how many suppliers we add, that there's one key skill that's actually a constraint for how much work we can get done in our organization. and that's often a blind spot. So that's something we need to watch out for. I'm a big fan of less push. There are times when push is really, really useful, when there's something really critical going on. If it's happening all of the time, it's uh, it's not a great sign. It's a sign that we're not really trusting teams to get some work done, and so it's like we're trying to keep them busy or something because they're lazy or something like that. And so often there's wisdom in leaving stuff on the backlog unstarted and letting teams finish product development, releases, projects, product backlog items, work items. Let them finish those before they take on the next ones. There's a bit of debate going on out there about teams, and what I'm talking about here is short-lived teams. Um, I'm a big fan of long-lived teams. I'm also a big fan of the idea of reteaming. I think there's merit in that. But when you kind of take it to the extent that you set up a team for every little project that you've got going on, that's where it can be a little bit problematic. That can typically be as a result of a lack of goal orientation, focusing on outcomes. Do you notice I didn't speak about outcomes so much so far? Because actually, with the earlier deletions that I talked about, me talking about outcomes when people haven't even focused on prioritizing, for example, it can be problematic, and it could be like ships passing in the night. I'm talking about something, but there's really no connection there. Maybe there's ruthlessness with people, and maybe the word commitment is being taken to mean a guarantee. Objectives and key results are useful. Uh, One of the things that I don't see so much with objectives and key results is dividing them between committed key results and aspirational key results. In my view, with agility, most if you are using objectives and key results, most of the key results would be aspirational because a lot of teams aren't planning beyond the current time box or sprint or month or whatever kind of timing they're using. In Scrum, commitment essentially means we're going to do our best, but making it a guarantee, like moving mountains, that can be problematic. There's a lot of debate about this, and some people disagree with me on this. But if you really want to be adaptive as an organization, if that's really something that you want to achieve, we need people to be honest with us when there are problems with how much work is underneath that, and if people feel they can't be open about how much progress or how many problems they're having with the progress, that it could lead to shortcuts, could lead to lack of transparency, and eventually leading to not so good things. At this point as well, a lack of cognitive diversity is something we should discourage. We should be encouraging cognitive diversity, having fresh thinking, and this is kind of building on letting non-experts start work, because sometimes, you know what, non-experts can bring a really fresh perspective, and we can discover really creative things. I was doing crazy eights or activates from Google Design Sprints today, and it's incredible what people can come up with if there's real diversity in the team and people feel that they don't have to all agree with each other. At this point as well, imposition is probably something that probably should be deleted. We need to be looking at, probably should have happened much earlier, quite honestly. But this is something at this point you need to be kind of trying to draw an end to imposition. And so there's a bit of so what with this. So why are these particular deletions important? Well, in my book, if you don't deal with these deletions, your environment is going to lack humanity. And agility is about people at the end of the day as well, and about people feeling that they're valued and that they can be inspired and that they can do great things and make a difference. And when a lot of work is pushed to people, and when there's just more stuff and there's a lack of goals, when you said you do it, so why didn't you get it done? Um, it can cause issues. I can see there's a question from John Elcock. How would you assess cognitive diversity? For me, a great place to start, John, checking that out would be look at Matthew Syed's book, Rebel Ideas. He wrote another book called Black Box Thinking. He writes for the Financial Times. He's often on Sky News as well, doing the press previews for the newspapers the following day. And a very wise author, and he wrote a whole book on this, and he starts actually with 9/11 in the United States, and he talks about lots of other things that have happened in recent history as well, and how. Thank you, John, for adding in Abraham for adding in the link there. It's a really powerful book. They even talk about some stories going up Mount Everest where, just to kind of cut a long story short, imagine you were climbing up Mount Everest and imagine you'd climbed lots of the other big peaks. And it's not like you're a complete amateur or anything, but let's say I'm the expert climber, so to speak, and you arrive in base camp and I say, look, I'm going to get you up, I'm going to get you down. You need to keep your mouth shut because every breath that you use speaking is going to waste oxygen, and we need loads of oxygen up there. And in a real story, what happened was there was a climbing group that went up, and one of the people in the climbing group, she was actually a commercial pilot, and she understood cloud formations and storms when she saw them. But because I was supposed to be the expert climber, she didn't speak up for some reason, and people died on the mountain that day. And basically, there was groupthink. There can be an over reliance on experts. So if you notice, for me, if you notice, it's like an echo chamber, and we're all kind of agreeing with each other, and there's a lack of appreciation for fresh thinking. That for me would be a classic signal. But the I think the go-to reference would be Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. So thank you for that question, John. Um, Aram has come back with another comment saying, Mark C, I start with building credibility, invest time in this, just as John has explained in the session, and explain, show what good looks like. It takes a lot of work. It does take a lot of work. And for me, we can be very patient as change agents. Sometimes I prefer to be a bad cop, and sometimes I need a good cop to work with me. I often need a sponsor who's willing to work with me to act like a partner with me, and sometimes I might want to say some inconvenient truths to if I feel there is groupthink going on, and if I feel that we need to wake up and smell the coffee, so to speak. Sometimes I will do something dramatic. Um, keeping very diplomatic still, but still being myself and being true to myself and true to my values and explaining what I'm seeing. And of course, if people don't listen, maybe I need to look at maybe who would they listen to, or is there anybody that they might listen to? So thank you for that, Aaron. Humanity is important. So already we talked about the first set of deletions about uh, the people in teams almost giving up because they feel like what's the point? And the second set of deletions, it's like we're kind of going nowhere fast. It's one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas. And now we've got humanity is a bit of an issue. And so if we lack humanity in the environment, we could have some challenges coming up soon. So let me go on to the next interventions that we'd have for some of those deletions, some suggestions that I have, and we'd love to hear suggestions from you as well. Um, because I'm not saying I've got all the answers here. This is a struggle for me as well. So maybe letting teams coordinate. If you have value streams, letting teams coordinate themselves. Maybe we don't need coordinating roles. There's sometimes value in coordinating roles in that people who understand the organization, they understand the politics, and they know how to navigate I can see the sense in that. But maybe starting to trust the teams more to coordinate. But that also means giving them the space to do that coordination, which means not having too much on their plate. So uh, having a bit of slack, letting people to self-manage around that. The Kanban people recognize the aging one. For me, it's probably the most important measurement to focus on with flow. A classic sign for me that kind of an early indicator that more work is coming in than going out um, is when work that was maybe a shiny new ball from 3 weeks ago is no longer the shiny new ball, and that shiny new ball from 3 weeks ago has actually been forgotten now, and it's kind of rotting in progress actually. And so focusing on which items are aging. So with some teams that I work with, in terms of dailies, if you have Kanban, for example, or Scrum, my kind of patterns that I recommend would be instead of talking about everything that you did yesterday and what we're doing today and impediments and all that, and thankfully they've been deleted from the Scrum guide. Instead of talking about those, first question would be, what do we need to cooperate on or collaborate on today? And the second question is, what needs a bit of love and attention? What's maybe aging or is blocked in our system at the moment that we need to pay extra attention to? Maybe thinking about having product teams. Um, I don't mind what you call them. I like to refer to the metaphor of cake. Um, and because everyone understands what a cake is, it's got layers and so on. And so I talk about layer of cake teams and slice of cake teams. And I know there's a body of knowledge around this. My preference is for teams that can actually deliver a slice of cake and not just deliver, but can discover what slice of cake needs to be delivered, discover to deliver. So I love Scrum at UX, for example, Kanban with UX. I love Lead UX. I think it's a wonderful contribution to help teams find those 70% of ideas that maybe we should never build. So really meeting customers. I've got a podcast, Exagility. I did an episode with Marty Kagan, really interesting interview, and he made an interesting comment that even brilliant product managers are wrong 70% of the time. And I have to say, in my case, it's about 90%, but we're really brilliant ones, 70%. And we could have built all that stuff, spent a fortune, and maybe nobody wants it. So it can be a bit of a concern if we're still focusing too much on projects and delivering outputs basically, but not really talking to customers. So maybe now we need to be talking to customers and users more regularly. Discover to deliver. Discover to deliver, by the way, is, I can't take credit for that expression. Ellen Gottesdiener is the lady who made me aware of this. She's actually got a book based on that strapline, Discover to Deliver. It's okay to be ruthless, but maybe we should be ruthless about value. Maybe we should be ruthless about which items we're not going to start, which projects we're not going to start. And maybe we should be compassionate with people and listen to our people and listen to some of the problems that they're suffering from. Because a lot of the things that are slowing teams down, you want teams to go better. I'm sure your Scrum Masters have a wonderful list of impediments that you can help them with to remove some of those things. And for me, an agile leader fixes problems. And so instead of imposing, maybe we can be looking at inviting people. Just looking at some of the comments again. So, Pooja, thank you for coming in. Thank you, John. Great session on organizational agility, authentic and sustainable. My suggestion will be trust the team and focus on outcomes and be ruthless with priorities. I can agree with that. And I think what I'm saying to you, Pooja, is a mistake that I used to make in the past, as recently as a few years ago, was I would come in with all sorts of fancy agile ideas, and maybe I needed to be talking about some of the basics first. And so that's the kind of the point of my talk here. That, for example, now I'm talking about focusing on aging, and some people say it's not the first thing you talk about. With executives, there are other things that I actually need to be dealt with first. There's a kind of level of progression. Now, this is not a linear system. You will understand within your context what where the right place is to start from. For me, some of the earlier deletions are enablers for some of the later deletions, if that makes sense. And thank you, Pooja, for your comments, and thanks, Matthew, as well, and for your comments. Okay, so we've got some of those now. I go a little bit faster. I can see the time is running by quite quickly. So the next set of deletions would be in terms of efficiency tunnel vision. If you look at my blog post on Scrum.org about what is organizational really, or on Medium, you'll notice that I came up with a set of words. I worked with other people. I didn't do this on my own. I've tried to do it 4 times. There'll be a fifth version coming out soon. And so I keep evolving this. And it's not like I know what organizational agility is. It's just that if you were to start somewhere and you wanted some kind of a starting point, something that had been thought through, then maybe you can start there. Maybe you can have a look at it and see what you think, and maybe remove some of the words that they don't really work in your situation. But one thing I look for is efficiency. And so now at this point, efficiency is fine, but it's probably going to kill us at this stage, because we could be another Kodak, another Nokia. I mean, don't get me wrong, these companies are coming back and they're just doing great things again. But classic signs again, as I sometimes I get bothered. I get very bothered about it, actually, when I see history repeating itself. It's like people haven't read history books, and greed feeds. We had the best year ever, the best 2 years ever. Everything's great, and they don't see that their competitors have actually gone in a different direction. They might have gone in a different direction for a very good reason, and maybe we're laggards, and maybe it's okay. Maybe we can eat more from the trough for now, but we're very prone to disruption. So we need to be much more serious about pivoting. And in certain situations, you might even be setting up a new P&L, because maybe the current P&L is actually never going to really go in that direction. It's a really difficult challenge. Guy Kawasaki gave a great talk on that. Trying to catch the next curve was his expression, to jump on the next curve. It's really difficult. Even though we know we need to do it, a lot of people don't do it. I've had situations where I met teams, I've onboarded teams, people who asked for my help, and there were 2 teams in particular. Each independently had different impediments that were 7 years old. 7 years old. And all the teams were depending on these teams. So the knock on in terms of cycle time was about 1 year. And so this really bothers me. These teams had actually escalated these problems, these impediments, to very senior leaders, and they were metaphorically smoking cigars and sticking their legs up on the desk and did nothing about it, and pushed the problems back down to the teams and said, you are empowered. But they were saying it in a cynical way, when actually they weren't really empowered. I've already talked about over milking the cow that we already have. Maybe at this point, instead of talking about scaling, we can be talking about, well, how can we make things simpler? Instead of focusing on projects, maybe we can be focusing more on value. Every initiative having budgets and so on. Maybe we need to be thinking about one set of money from which we can get value. Jim Collins wrote a book, From Good to Great. There's a few things that I don't quite like about the book, and that history has basically proved that some of the theory in the book is wrong. And my book, even though it was well researched, time has told us that some of those companies were not so great. But a few things I really liked from that book were, do we have people sitting in the wrong seats on the bus? Do we have the wrong people on the bus? Do you have the wrong person driving the bus? And do we have people in the wrong seats on the bus? And at this point, we need to be looking at deleting that. We need to be looking at deleting individual meritocracy. Maybe deleting the idea, build it and they will come, because maybe 70% or more of our ideas that we have are actually wrong. And maybe stop this BS that we have, that we're consumer centric. The more I hear people say that we're customer centric, the more I realize that we're actually not. Because if you have to say it, we're probably not. And what's the so what for this? Why is this important? Well, without these deletions, it's a feature factory. It's an expression for delivering lots of stuff. But we're taking really high risks with the money that the company is investing. And we might be lucky, And we might be very lucky for a while, but at some point, you could end up with what Jared Spool calls feature rot or experience rot. This is actually the point where we, prior to us getting disrupted, where we've added so much stuff that people aren't using that anymore, and now some competitor can come up with some simpler version of the same product or service. It doesn't even have half of the functionality, but they do it so much better, and it's so much easier. And so that's a danger when you're in this place. How could you deal with this? Maybe we need to be more compassionate about dissent. Maybe we need to allow people to be opposing some of the ideas that we've had. Maybe we need to focus on fixing problems. A lot of companies are already talking about quarterly reviews, but maybe also moving the money quarterly as well, because as we discover that certain ideas are actually really doing really well, surprisingly, and others are doing really unwell, maybe surprisingly also. Maybe we need to kind of move where we're laying down our bets, because at the end of the day, we are gambling, we are making bets actually. Maybe we can think about self-designing teams at this point. Maybe we can think about experimenting when the risk is high. A lot of the time, when, for example, Scrum teams have items in the product backlog and they say the items at the top of the backlog are very valuable, sometimes they say that. And I would say, well, they're probably potentially valuable, but we actually don't know. Sometimes the risk of getting the value is so high that maybe we need to run some experiments. Do we have the right business problem that we're looking at? Are we worried about the right people? Are we even if we're worried about the right people, are they looking for different outcomes? Are they looking for different solutions? Maybe they want what we have, but they're not willing to pay for it. Maybe we need to start discovering to deliver. Um, Maybe we need to be getting out of the building. Isn't it amazing that I'm only talking about this now? You can do this earlier. Of course, you should be doing this earlier. What I find though is that unless the earlier deletions have happened, maybe the space isn't there for these things to get some oxygen, so to speak. But like I say, there are probably more skilled people here on this call who can go straight to the stuff. This is just a level of progression that I've noticed, but it's not linear. Reminder, it's not a linear system. Another set of deletions would be data-less decisions. I was training some people at the weekend, and this chap was on my training call, and I was very impressed with a sentence that he came up with. He says, "The plural for anecdotes is no data." I really like that strapline that he came up with. I'm not saying we should have data-driven decision making, because often the data can be based on some subjective models. Clayton Christensen is famous for saying that in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma. I'm talking about data-informed decision making instead. So maybe maybe trying to underpin some of what we're seeing in the data with interviews and so on. Maybe instead of just going for everything that we want to deliver, maybe we need to be thinking 80/20. Maybe we need to be um, saying, how can we get 80% of the outcomes with maybe 20% of the outputs? Um, Maybe we need to be reducing the ill-suited processes and workflows that are really almost wrestling with the teams that are trying to make progress. I've worked with really, really large companies where they had compliance police for very good reason. They had lots of regulation and so on. But often, what can happen is the people, the supporting functions, enabling functions, a lot of the time they can be very, very helpful, and sometimes they just come with a list of mandatory deliverables, but they can't remember why they're needed, and they've actually lost sight of why what risks we're trying to manage and why we're doing this. So finding alternative ways of demonstrating compliance while still being very professional. Maybe changing the promotion and reward systems in the company. Maybe instead of just having a managerial only career path, we could be thinking about a growth path. Can people grow horizontally? Can they actually stay technical And you can do that with technical meritocracies, but I'm talking about here not just saying specialize in your technical role, but actually learning other technical and other business domain skills, and actually uh, being able to progress career wise as well. And some people say, is there any career when you've got agile? And there's some merit in that argument. I won't go into that just right now. At this point, maybe with some of the before some of the previous deletions, it was about more better, faster, cheaper. But maybe now we need to be thinking more about adaptiveness. And instead of not giving the team space to really be excellent in their technical practices, maybe we need to give them the space to do that. And maybe it's none of our business how people do their technical people do their work, and maybe we should trust the professionals to do the work properly and do what they think needs to be done. My belief is that if we don't deal with these deletions, the potential is more limited than it could be. And I can see the time is kind of going by quite quickly. So I'll just kind of go pick a few bullets in the last few ones, because at this stage, you're probably a very agile organization at this stage. We talked about some of these, well, maybe treating some of the initiatives as bets, maybe considering descaling processes and flows, maybe thinking about getting some technical coaches as well, maybe thinking of the idea of swarming with teams as well, to try and improve if you've got technical specialists who are very really they've got the latest and greatest in terms of what needs to be done in particular technical areas, that we've got some technical coaches who can really help with that. Lots of deletions. And I guess the final ones would be that I'll just go through very quickly would be maybe thinking about the past. Maybe we need to be thinking more about the future. Maybe instead of creating new leader positions, that maybe you can have new leadership without leadership in a position actually. Maybe instead of focusing on customers and end users exclusively, maybe we're focusing more on our footprint on the environment. I would hope that we're worrying about this much earlier, and some companies are. So my point is not a linear model. You might be doing this much sooner. I hope uh, most companies are worried about the environment at this point in time. Maybe instead of dependency management, it's more about how do we get teams to learn more? How do we broaden their understanding of the products and services so that they can be more flexible? Maybe instead of targets, maybe we can think of trends. So, what way are the trends going? And if you don't do these deletions, it's my hypothesis that we will lose customers. And there's a number of interventions there, like, for example, maybe having goals in multiple time horizons, maybe expanding the definition of your product. I love the way the less community dodges that bullet of portfolio management, where you increase the capability of the teams by expanding the definition of the product and then encouraging teams to learn. I really love that. Lots of deletions, and finally, maybe appreciation of ego. This is getting really agile at this point. John Seddon would be proud of maybe the lack of backlogs. John Seddon sees a backlog as just another queue, is my understanding. Stopping unsustainability. Stopping. I mean, shouldn't we always have diversity and inclusion? Or there shouldn't be any hint of lack of diversity and inclusion. Maybe we don't need 5-day weeks anymore. Maybe we don't need transformations anymore. Isn't it kind of sad that this is only coming up now? Maybe we need to be thinking about other ways, but my hypothesis is that unless we have these deletions, we could lose our best employees. And I have some interventions here, which I won't go into now because you want to be a really agile organization to get to this. This is the complete set of deletions that I come up with. Can you imagine how simple your organization would be if you could progressively get rid of a lot of these? Context is everything. So do whatever you think is right in your situation as an executive or someone working with an executive. My worry is that if you're in a situation where the people in the organization aren't reading history and they're just repeating what's happening in history, having their own Kodak Nokia moment, maybe the executives will get deleted. So this is something that could happen actually. That there'll be so much pressure on the organization to make progress that the executives will be deleted, and failing that, my fear is that the organization will be deleted. And so the whole pattern here is, how do we make things simpler? How do we create an environment where it's human, it's authentic, it's sustainable, it's not agile theater, it's real, and we're really trying to make a difference, and people are inspired and really enjoying every moment. I'll now take final questions if you have any. I'm just looking at the comments window here. Russ has a comment there. Start by listening and not talking. I love that one, Russ. Thank you. And yes, leadership at all levels. Uh, Not necessarily having to be a leader, and this really comes into play when you start trusting teams to do their own coordination between each other, because leaders will emerge without it being a position, and there will be different leaders at different times. Because I love what Echikadisa said in the corporate life cycle, in his book on the corporate life cycle. Sometimes a change is a dance, and sometimes we need different types of energy. And maybe I'm not the guy for this particular move, and maybe I need someone like Russ to come in, or John, who have more skills in a particular area, and maybe I can come back in again at a later point when my part of the dance is up, kind of thing. So recognizing myself as well, where the organization gets the best, John in my case, or where for Russ when the organization gets the best, Russ. Um, there's something that bothers me at times is when organizations ask me to do what really doesn't give them the best value from what I can offer, and basically asking me to do what they think needs to be done rather than, I'm not saying that I know what needs to be done. I need to be humble about that. But I probably need to do what I'm best at, and recognize where other people can add more value, and recognize when that time is the right time. I'm looking at some comments again from Cheatham. Thank you, John. Thank you, Cheatham, as well. Lovely to see you here again. And John, thank you very much for your comment. Amazing conversation. John Coleman and Bram Schutz. Let's do this again soon. Love that, John. And love to talk to you again. Keep an eye out for the Exagility podcast. I interview very interesting people. Jared Spool was in the most recent episode, and there was Dave Snowden, and there was lots of other, Marty Kagan, all sorts of other interesting people. And it was in the top 20 on Thinkers 360 as well in terms of podcasts to look at, and it's doing well in the charts in some countries. So check it out. And you don't have to listen to me, listen to the really interesting people that I'm interviewing. And it's really about helping the audience to understand their content, and making sure and then letting executives make their own decisions about what the right thing is to do. Nader, thank you as well. Said thanks, John Coleman, another great session, and thanks to Bram Schutz. From Jiva as well, thank you as well, Jiva. So Bram, I guess we can leave it a few minutes to see if there's any more final questions.
Sure, that's good. I was on mute, of course. Yeah, that's good. Let's wait a minute, and we can see if there are any other questions.
Looks like it's quiet in the Western Front.
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody's gone to the table to have dinner now, by now.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Wonderful. John, thank
Yeah.
you very much. Let's wrap this one up. Thanks a lot. And thanks everybody as well for the great comments. That was really good. Really, really nice.
Thank you, Bron. Thank you, Abba, and thank you, Lyde, as well, for having me on this talk. And thank you as well for the engagement from the audience. I really appreciated all the questions and the comments. Feel free to reach out to me independently offline as well. Thank you so much.
All right, cheers. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.